You cheated on me, didn't you? There's no way we could have a child with AB blood type. Echoes John's angry shout. His face, monstrous in anger, a stark contrast to the man who was smiling and playing with his son just moments ago. This discovery was made when our son was admitted to a daycare that required a blood test. Both parents being type A, we assumed our son would be either type A or O. However, upon opening the results, we were shocked to find type AB. What? How? As I struggled to make sense of it, staring at the document, John erupted in anger, accusing me of infidelity and bearing another man's child. His mother, standing beside him, glared at me with equal intensity. You hussy! We're getting a divorce. We don't need a loose woman or another man's child in this house. His mother, looking at me and our son with disgust, pointed towards the door, trying to throw us out. Yet, I pleaded desperately. It's not true. I've never cheated. My son is undoubtedly John's child. I knew more than anyone that there was no truth to the allegations of infidelity. I had never even considered the possibility. However, John refused to believe me, hurling insults in a fit of rage. I want a divorce. Take your filthy child and leave. Despite their son being right there, John repeated his harsh words and demands for divorce. Anna clenched her teeth, holding back tears, feeling the pain of being disbelieved by the man who had been her partner. It seemed futile to say anything at this moment. Realizing this as I faced their demonic expressions, I understood they had made a foolish mistake by not listening and jumping to conclusions about infidelity. My name is Anna. I am an employee who married my colleague, John, a few years ago. Living a busy yet happy life, sharing household chores, going on dates, and enjoying laughter-filled days. However, there was one source of concern. John's mother, who lived a bit away. In the beginning, shortly after we got married, my mother-in-law was kind and warmly welcomed me. However, recently, every time we meet, she's been asking, "Do you have children yet?" and "I want to see my grandchildren soon." At first, I would laugh it off, but as time passed since our marriage, the frequency of my mother-in-law's nagging increased, and I grew to dislike it. Before I knew it, I found myself avoiding meetings with her. Not that we didn't want children. I've been longing for a child even without my mother-in-law saying so. I always believed that children are a blessing, yet the signs of pregnancy are nowhere to be seen. It's distressing enough without my oblivious mother-in-law's unsolicited advice. We've always had the desire for a child, too. We too longed for a child but disliked the unnecessary pressure from John's mother. But the fact remains that we haven't been able to have a child for so long. Eventually, they decided to see a doctor, wondering if I might be the cause. But the tests revealed John was the issue. The test results show that the problem lies with your husband, the doctor said, causing John to freeze. It appeared I was fine, but John had a slight fertility issue, though not severe enough to eliminate the possibility of natural conception. We decided to follow the doctor's advice and continued trying at our own pace, doing everything we could to conceive. The fertility journey was long, with John's mother often intruding with unwelcome advice. Anna, still no child? It's been 3 years since you got married. Could the problem be with you? Have you been to the doctor? I'm sorry, could you please be a bit more patient with us? I always ended up apologizing, even though John's mother never suspected her son could be the cause of our fertility issues. How much longer must I wait? I want to see my grandchild. John, you should talk to her. Yeah, I know. John replied, always agreeing with his mother. Just one admission that he was the cause could have possibly stopped his mother from meddling. Why won't he say anything? My distrust in my husband grew, but maybe he finds it hard to admit that he's the reason. His pride is high, and he's sensitive. Perhaps his male pride won't allow him to confess to his own mother, so I reluctantly kept the reason to myself and endured his mother's words. But those hard days finally came to an end. Our efforts paid off, and we were blessed with a child. When the pregnancy was confirmed, we were so happy, holding hands and rejoicing together. The baby in my belly grew healthy, and since my husband said, a mother should be by her child's side, agreeing with what I've heard from others about how quickly children grow, I quit my job to have the baby. The child born was a son. We named him Sean. My husband chose the name. Indeed, our own child is incredibly precious. The moment I picked him up, tears wouldn't stop flowing because of the small weight in my arms. Even the once nagging mother-in-law has become kind as if she's a different person. However, there was a bit of discomfort in the words she spoke to my son.
Oh my! A boy? Good job, Anna. Now our family line is secure.
Her praises seemed overly focused on having a boy or a son. Sure, a boy might carry on the family name, but I didn't have my son to continue the lineage. While puzzled by her lineage-focused comments, being freed from my mother-in-law and having our son meant my husband and I could dedicate ourselves to raising our child, starting a new life as a family of 3. Raising a child was hard. Everything was a first for me, a new mother, and I often felt lost. Trying to put my son back in bed after rocking him to sleep, only for him to wake up crying, or watching him start to walk around everywhere as he grew, every day was challenging. Still, being healed by my son's love, we were busy every day. One day, I received a phone call. It was from my former boss. They were short-staffed and hoped I could come back. My husband and I met at work, and although I had resigned, my husband was still working there. My husband, of course, knew my former boss, but they were in different departments, so they didn't meet often. The boss wanted us to discuss and hoped for my return. When I mentioned the offer to my husband, his face soured, but knowing the shortage at the company as he worked there, he eventually nodded in agreement. Perhaps his hesitant look was because he wanted me to stay with our son as much as possible. The former boss mentioned making it easier for me to work while raising a child, so considering the favor I owed, I decided to return to work. Since I was going back to work, we decided to enroll our 3-year-old son in daycare instead of kindergarten. The daycare admission prompted us to do an allergy test and a blood type test for precaution. Many don't test it recently, and this was our first time learning our son's blood type. My mother-in-law also wanted to know my son's blood type, so we invited her over for the reveal. Both my husband and I being type A, we assumed our son would likely be type A or O, but there was a pleasant tension of anticipation. Regardless of his blood type, our son is precious to us. However, the test results we received from the doctor were beyond our expectations.
What does this mean?
My husband trembled as he scrutinized the test results brought home. Our son was type AB. A blood type impossible for a child born to 2 type A parents. When we saw the hospital results, we questioned if there had been a mistake, but the doctor confirmed it was indeed our son's result. I knew I was type A from tests taken during my pregnancy. If our son is type AB, could there have been a mistake with my husband's blood type? Why did it turn out this way? There's no doubt he is my husband's child. Then, seeing me with a gloomy expression, my husband began to say something unbelievable. You cheated on me, didn't you? Did you get pregnant all of a sudden because you cheated with another man? Otherwise, there's no way we could have an AB blood type child. Shocked, I was taken aback by my husband's angry shouting. Me, cheat? That's impossible. I hadn't looked at another man. All through our attempts to conceive, I only wanted a child with my husband, and I worked hard for it.
How can you say such a thing? I've never cheated.
I pleaded desperately. But my husband wouldn't listen.
It was my fault Anna didn't get pregnant for so long. And then she suddenly does, there must have been another man. I knew something was off. That's not true. Sean is your child. Believe me.
Our son started crying loudly, scared by my husband's terrifying demeanor. I hugged our son, appealing to my husband's anger. I swear I didn't cheat. He's genuinely my husband's son. I thought my husband, who had been with me through our fertility journey, would understand, but he was furious.
Shut up. You adulteress. Who would believe a word from a woman who cuckolds?
My husband didn't believe me at all. His harsh words made me burst into tears. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law started berating me as well.
Anna, did you get pregnant with another man's child? How disgraceful. Were you trying to pass off someone else's child as the heir? How vile. It's really not true. Sean is mine and John's child. There's no mistake. Please believe me.
My mother-in-law, who had been calm until seeing the test results, now looked at me and my son with disdain. No matter how much I appealed, the two of them wouldn't believe me. Instead, they blamed me with faces like demons.
You loose woman. We don't need a dirty woman in this house. Pack your bags and leave with your child immediately.
You're the worst. I'll send you the divorce papers, be prepared. Don't ever show me someone else's child again. Coldly stating this, my mother-in-law pointed towards the entrance with her index finger. My husband glared, seeming to agree. Even if the blood types didn't match, is it right to accuse without any verification? At least, this wasn't how they used to treat a son they once adored. In front of these two raging figures, I had no allies. Biting back tears from the baseless accusations, I was forced out of the house with minimal belongings and my precious son in my arms. We lived in a hotel temporarily until we found a new place. It hurt to dip into the savings I had before quitting my job, but there was no choice. My son, playing on the bed, was my only consolation. Then we moved to a small apartment, and I returned to work after my son was placed in daycare, as requested by my former boss. But returning to work, I faced a tough situation. Did you hear she cheated before getting pregnant? So, are the cuckolding rumors true? Poor husband. Even while working, I could hear such whispers. Either my husband was spreading complaints about me, or wrong rumors were circulating. Although many of my colleagues, who knew me well from before, believed I wouldn't do such a thing, rumors are not easily dispelled once spread. Work itself wasn't too hard once I got back into the swing of things, but the stairs treated me like a pariah because they believed the rumors made it difficult. The worst was hearing from Camila, my husband's closest female colleague, who threw the most unbearable words at me. How dare you show your face here after what you did to John? I have no work to assign you. Why don't you quit? Your presence is polluting the workplace atmosphere. Do you understand? She would demean me openly at work, calling my husband by his first name and looking down on me with contempt. Camila didn't stop at verbal abuse. She went as far as to redirect the work meant for me to others and withhold necessary documents, continuing her harassment. I received glares from the employees she handed work to, and though it wasn't my fault, I felt sorry. There were times I almost broke down. But if I quit now, I wouldn't be able to support my precious son. No matter the harassment or rumors, I worked desperately without giving up. By the time I went to pick up my son from daycare, I was exhausted, and the daily walk home with him was harder than I could have imagined. As I slumped on the sofa, my son would pat my head with his little hands. Looking at his face, he'd smile and say in his clumsy way, "Mommy, good job." My ally was right here. With tears welling up in my eyes, I hugged my son tightly. I decided. If my husband and his family were going to go this far, I would fight back thoroughly. I hesitated just before submitting the divorce papers, thinking it might not be right to take my son's father away from him. But a father who wouldn't even believe in his son is not needed. My son, I will protect. I can say with confidence that I have not cheated. All that was left was to find a way to prove it. That night, after putting my son to bed, I called my husband. I want to talk about child support. But before we get a divorce, let's do a DNA test. To settle things once and for all. A DNA test? Are you sure? I don't mind. Take whatever you need, hair, blood, anything. It'll just prove your infidelity. My husband agreed with a sneer, certain it would confirm my cheating. Later, we collected the necessary samples from my husband and submitted them to the appropriate agency. The tests were for paternity and my husband's blood type. Even as we collected the samples, he looked at me with disdain, but I didn't care. I had decided to fight. With irrefutable evidence in hand, after dropping off my son at daycare, I headed straight to my husband's family home, where he was also present. Got the proof of your infidelity? Come on, show me. My husband lounged on the sofa with a contemptuous attitude. Beside him, my mother-in-law looked at me with loathing. I pulled out a document from my bag and silently slammed the test results on the table. My husband picked up the document. As soon as he saw the results, his face went pale. Sean is undeniably my child. The test results definitively established that my son was indeed my husband's child. The reason my son was type AB was because my husband had a rare condition known as blood chimerism, meaning his body contained two different types of stem cells. Apparently, my husband's body has both type A and type B red blood cells mixed together. There are many subtypes of type A blood, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. It seems the type B red blood cells in my husband were weaker, and previous blood tests had predominantly shown the stronger type A. In essence, my husband was actually type AB, so it was entirely normal for our child, with me being type A, to be type AB. Furthermore, the DNA test also confirmed our parent-child relationship, leaving no room for doubt. John!
Let me see that paper.
My mother-in-law snatched the test results from my husband. Her face turned as pale as my husband's, and she began to tremble. Realizing her mistake, her attitude changed drastically from how she had berated me, and they both began to apologize.
I'm so sorry. I said terrible things to both Anna and Sean. Please, let us make amends. Please forgive me, Anna. I'm begging you. Move back in with Sean right away, won't you? He needs us, right?
Their convenient apologies made my skin crawl. I was appalled at their quick change of face. They seemed to have forgotten the words they hurled at me.
Have you forgotten what you called me?
Slut. Loose woman. Accused me of cuckooing.
You doubted me without a shred of belief. And you think I can live with you after that? I'll be filing for divorce.
I stated firmly, leaving my husband speechless. Regretting his words too late, he slumped his shoulders and began to cry. Crying now was too late. After all, he was the one who first mentioned divorce. I have no intention of reversing the divorce. In the midst of my husband's sobbing in silence, it was my mother-in-law who made the first move.
Fine, I accept the divorce. But could you at least let me have Sean's custody? I'll raise him responsibly.
My mother-in-law approached me, placing her hand on my arm. I wondered who she thought she was to say that. After everything, her words, seemingly aimed at securing an heir, prompted me to shake off her hand.
What are you talking about? You threw out an innocent child without listening to a word he said. I cannot entrust my precious son to people who refuse to listen.
My firm stance left my mother-in-law at a loss for words. Hearing her persistent but, I decided to reveal another card.
If you have objections to the divorce, we can discuss it with lawyers. And this isn't the only reason for the divorce. What do you mean?
My mother-in-law tilted her head, next to my husband who was breaking out in a cold sweat. It seemed he had an idea.
John should know very well, shouldn't he?
As I glared at my husband, he was clearly shaken. Like a frog under a snake's gaze.
No, what are you talking about?
Despite his feigned ignorance, I pulled out several photos from my bag, spreading them on the table and smiling sweetly at my husband.
It seems you're quite close to Camila.
The photos captured the moment my husband and his colleague, who had been harassing me, entered a hotel. Each photo, dated differently, showed them frequently heading to the hotel, arm in arm, in what was unmistakably an affair. I had always wondered why the harassment from Camila was particularly vicious. Given their close relationship, including her strange look when I returned to work, I suspected they had more than just a colleague relationship. My hunch was correct. Taking advantage of our separation, my husband had been frequently visiting hotels with Camila after work. A little investigation provided easy proof of infidelity. In hindsight, my husband's quick accusation of my cheating was probably because he was doing it himself.
No, it's a misunderstanding, Anna.
He weakly shook his head, refusing to admit it. So, I pushed a voice recorder towards him.
Can you still say it's different after listening to this?
I pressed play, and my husband grimaced as a colleague's voice filled the room.
We were meeting all the time until you got pregnant. John wanted to break up after you were pregnant, but I always hated that. If you hadn't gotten pregnant, I could have continued my relationship with John forever. And then to hear you cheated and had another man's child. I felt so sorry for John, that's why we started seeing each other again. John even said he wanted to marry me.
The recording was of Camila confessing everything after realizing she couldn't escape the evidence I presented. Meaning, Camila had been involved with my husband before my pregnancy, but after learning about it, he proposed a breakup, prompting her to retaliate against me out of spite. However, the commotion with me led them to resume their relationship recently. There was no room for my husband's excuses anymore.
To doubt someone else's fidelity while being unfaithful yourself, it's truly appalling. Are you really a father?
Overwhelmed by the undeniable evidence, my husband seemed to have lost his words. He continued to open and close his mouth, searching for excuses. As he barely uttered a sound, the ripping of photos tore through the silence. It took a moment to understand what happened. Looking towards the sound, I saw my previously silent mother-in-law tearing up one of the affair photos. In front of me, she grabbed my husband's collar with a furious expression.
John cheated? Are you repeating the same mistake as your father? What a foolish thing to do!
My mother-in-law yelled. I remembered noticing something awkward about the relationship between my mother-in-law and her late husband. They didn't seem very close from an outsider's perspective. I never asked why, but from what my mother-in-law has said, it seems my father-in-law had a past of infidelity, similar to my husband.
I even got separated once. But then I thought Anna had a child with another man. It's impossible for Anna to have been with someone else before she got pregnant. You idiot son. It's because of your behavior that you can't even believe your own son is yours. You're going to lose the heir because of you.
My mother-in-law looked ready to hit my husband, who kept making excuses. She was furious about my husband's affair but didn't agree with treating our son as merely an heir. Sighing at the heated argument between mother and son, I stepped in to stop the fight.
Both of you, take your argument elsewhere. John, I'll be reporting this to our company.
At that moment, John shoved his mother away from grabbing his shirt and started begging.
I'm sorry, Anna. Please, just don't report this. It's all my fault, I beg you, forgive me.
I looked down on my pleading husband with cold eyes. If he dreaded the report so much, why did he do those things in the first place? Ignoring my husband, I attempted to leave, crying, begging me to reconsider. His actions only deepened my disdain. I'm glad my son wasn't here for this. Sighing, I turned back coldly.
You're aware of the impact your and Camila's actions had on my job, right? It's related to the company's losses, so of course, I'll report it. That's only natural.
You reap what you sow. He must take full responsibility. Handing him a green paper as a final blow, I said.
When I pleaded my innocence, you never once believed me. I can no longer forgive or trust you. Never show me your face again.
It was punishment for not believing in me and our son. In front of the completed divorce papers, my husband, looking utterly defeated, took the pen and signed. Thus, my doubts were cleared, and my resolved battle concluded. I reported my husband and Camila's infidelity and the harassment I faced due to rumors he spread, just as I had declared. Camila was fired for causing operational disruptions through her harassment. Despite attempting to continue the affair, the scandal led John to reject her again, resulting in her making several silent calls to our company, causing further trouble with the police. After being fired, she continued to be a nuisance. John wasn't fired but was moved to a less significant department. Despite calling me names and being proven wrong, the rumors of his affair during my pregnancy made his position at work untenable, leading him to resign quietly. Demanding compensation for his affair and kicking us out, John's savings were depleted. I felt no sympathy. It was a consequence of his actions. Since losing her husband, my mother-in-law had depended on John's financial support, putting both in a financial bind. Prideful John, citing the need for a suitable job, has struggled to re-employ, leaving his elderly mother to work part-time for living expenses and Sean's child support. Meanwhile, freed from these burdens, I, understood by my coworkers, manage work while spending quality time with my son, enjoying fulfilling days watching him grow.